They were once the kings of the road, symbols of power, pride, and prosperity. Massive trucks and gleaming SUVs rolling across the American landscape, fueled by ambition, ego, and cheap credit. For decades, automakers told a simple story. Bigger is better, and Americans believed it, but now that story is falling apart. Across the country, dealer lots are overflowing with unsold vehicles, hundreds of thousands of them. Rows of gleaming pickup trucks sit under the sun, collecting dust. Their engines never started, their wheels never turned. Once, these machines sold faster than factories could build them. Today, they are orphans of an industry that overreached, victims of its own success. Banks are pulling credit lines. Dealerships are closing overnight. Salesmen who once bragged about bonuses now whisper about layoffs. The air in America's car lots has changed. It smells like desperation. Some dealers have begun relabeling brand new trucks as used just to trick lenders into extending another line of credit. Others are selling inventory below cost or hiding vehicles from auditors. It's survival, not strategy. And the automakers, the giants of Detroit who once defined America's industrial muscle, are quietly panicking. General Motors, Ford, Toyota, all facing the same brutal math: too many vehicles, too few buyers, and too much debt. They built for a market that no longer exists. The average new car price has soared above $50,000, but consumers are done paying luxury prices for necessity. They're walking away. Even electric vehicles, once hailed as the next great frontier, aren't saving anyone. Government subsidies and marketing couldn't stop the slowdown. Dealerships report lots where 1 in 3 cars are electric and still unsold. The promise of progress now looks like a warehouse of forgotten dreams, plugged in but going nowhere. Behind the glossy commercials and smiling spokesmen, the industry is bleeding. Dealers are paying more in interest on unsold inventory than in wages for their staff. Each idle truck pushes them closer to bankruptcy. Some have mortgaged their homes to stay afloat. Others have simply given up, turning off the lights and walking away from decades-old family businesses. The collapse of SUVs and trucks isn't just a story about cars. It's a story about the end of an era, the death of excess, of blind confidence, of the idea that growth can last forever. For years, the auto industry was built on a fantasy: if you build it, they will buy. But America isn't buying anymore. The market is saturated, consumers are skeptical, and the machine has finally stalled. In this video, we'll go inside the crisis that no one saw coming, from the empty showrooms of Atlanta to the shuttered factories of Michigan. We'll uncover how the race for bigger profits, bigger cars, and bigger risks led to one of the most dramatic downturns in modern automotive history. Because this isn't just about vehicles, it's about the end of the American obsession with more, and the beginning of something entirely new. For decades, the American automobile was not just a vehicle, it was a statement. Nowhere was that more evident than in the towering trucks and gleaming SUVs that came to define the nation's highways. These machines weren't simply modes of transportation, they were extensions of identity, rolling monuments to power, self-reliance, and the illusion of endless growth. The suburban driveway became a stage for status. Owning a Silverado, an F-150, or a Jeep Grand Cherokee wasn't about need. It was about belonging to a culture that celebrated excess as freedom. For over 20 years, automakers sold this dream with evangelical confidence, pushing the narrative that bigger meant safer, stronger, more successful. The problem was, it already had. In early 2024, as interest rates climbed and household debt hit record highs, the foundation began to crumble. Average car payments crossed $780 a month, while insurance premiums for full-size trucks surged by 40% in some states. Families who once stretched their budgets to afford a new Tahoe or Ram 1500 simply stopped buying. By late 2024, parking lots in Texas, Michigan, and Arizona were filling up with unsold inventory. A dealer outside Dallas reported having so many trucks, we could pave a highway with them. In Ohio, a regional GM franchise quietly rented farmland just to store overflow vehicles under tarps. Yet, even as the signs of crisis mounted, executives continued to reassure investors. In leaked internal memos, one Ford executive allegedly wrote that sentiment is temporary. Americans will come back to trucks once inflation stabilizes. They didn't. Instead, buyers pivoted toward smaller crossovers, used cars, and electric models on clearance. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, full-size truck sales dropped by double digits. By the time analysts began calling it the SUV recession, it was too late. The icons of American success, the Ford Explorer, the Chevy Silverado, the GMC Yukon, were still standing tall on their pedestals, but nobody was walking into the showroom to take them home. The dream that once roared across the open highways of the American West now sat idle, silent, and heavy as debt. The era of the big machine was over. The echo of its collapse had just begun. The logic seemed irresistible. Bigger vehicles brought bigger profits. A full-size truck could earn a manufacturer up to $17,000 in gross margin, compared to less than $2,000 for a mid-size sedan. The math was intoxicating, and executives bragged openly about truck-based profitability during investor calls. Wall Street rewarded them handsomely. By 2022, stock valuations for the Detroit's automakers were pegged almost entirely to the SUV and pickup segments. The companies were no longer car manufacturers, they were truck empires. But empires fall not because of external enemies, but because of their own excess. As the profits rose, so did arrogance. Automakers ignored warning signs from analysts who pointed out the growing gap between production and demand. Reports from the National Auto Dealers Association in mid-2023 showed dealer inventory rising by 22% quarter over quarter, but executives dismissed it as a temporary adjustment. When interest rates began to climb, automakers doubled down, betting that consumer loyalty would outweigh financial strain. They were wrong. Buyers who once financed their dream trucks at 0.9% interest now face rates as high as 8%. Average monthly payments climbed past $800. Still, factories kept running, spitting out vehicles no one could afford. The result of this hubris was a dangerous imbalance between supply and demand. Factories ran at near full capacity while showrooms overflowed. In states like Oklahoma and Florida, dealers were renting abandoned shopping mall lots just to store unsold vehicles. One viral drone video from late 2024 showed over 12,000 unclaimed pickup trucks lined up like metallic dominoes outside a shipping terminal in Georgia. For the first time in a generation, the bottleneck wasn't in production, it was in sales. The system had flipped. The automotive giants had also underestimated the speed at which global economics could turn. Inflation spiked, fuel prices fluctuated, and the cost of raw materials made each new model more expensive to build. Yet sticker prices continued to climb, outpacing wages by nearly 40%. It was as if the industry had forgotten who its customers were. Automakers had built a market for the rich in a country where fewer people could afford to be rich. By late 2024, production schedules were finally slashed, but the slowdown came too late. The warehouses were full, dealers were drowning in interest payments, and consumers had moved on. In one internal audit leaked to the press, a major manufacturer admitted that nearly 300,000 unsold vehicles from the previous fiscal year had no foreseeable retail path. The phrase became a quiet metaphor for the entire industry. Automakers had built millions of machines for a demand that didn't exist. monuments to miscalculation stranded in parking lots across America. What was once the engine of prosperity had become a symbol of excess, arrogance, and denial. By early 2025, the full weight of the crisis had moved from the factories to the front lines, the dealerships. The once glittering showrooms filled with neon lights and optimism had become graveyards of unsold metal. Salesmen who once joked about record bonuses now stood silently beside rows of motionless trucks, their smiles replaced by the grim awareness that every day a vehicle sat idle, it cost them money. The lots looked the same from coast to coast, endless seas of chrome and steel, all waiting for buyers who no longer existed. A dealership in Phoenix reported paying over $400,000 a month just in interest and storage fees for unsold inventory. In Detroit's suburbs, desperate dealers hired night security not to protect cars from thieves, but to prevent employees from vandalizing or stealing parts to sell for quick cash. The financial burden was suffocating. Every vehicle sitting on a dealer's lot represented a loan, money borrowed from banks or automakers themselves, accruing interest daily. When sales slowed, those debts didn't disappear. They multiplied. Dealers began using short-term floor plan extensions, a kind of financial bandage meant to buy time. But time was the one thing they didn't have. Many banks, already burned by rising defaults, tightened lending standards. JP Morgan reportedly pulled financing from 320 dealerships in 6 months. By June 2025, over 1,200 independent auto dealers across the country had shut down, a 27% drop from the year before. Some simply vanished overnight, leaving customers with half-processed loans and unpaid titles. Those who remained resorted to increasingly desperate tactics. In Kansas City, a GM dealership started registering brand new trucks as executive demos to qualify for lower tax rates and cheaper insurance. A Ford franchise in Florida was caught labeling unsold vehicles as pre-owned to qualify for higher resale financing. One Toyota dealer near Atlanta quietly admitted to selling new Highlanders to a shell company it controlled, then leasing them back to customers under false documentation. These were not isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a collapsing business model. Meanwhile, the showroom atmosphere changed from polished professionalism to quiet panic. Some dealers dimmed the lights or closed early to save on utilities. Employees whispered about canceled commissions and frozen bonuses. Morale was so low that in a few dealerships, managers placed motivational posters with slogans like, "Keep driving forward," or "We're in this together." But even those began to feel ironic. Many salespeople had taken pay cuts to avoid layoffs, and those who stayed often spent their days calling lists of previous customers, begging them to trade up, refinance, or take on new leases at historic discounts. Buyers, aware of their new power, bargained ruthlessly. It was a reversal unseen in a generation. The customer was finally in control. Automakers who once dictated terms now competed in a race to the bottom. Rebates returned, first small, then massive. Lease deals dropped to levels not seen since the financial crisis of 2008. Tesla cut its monthly lease rates twice within a single quarter, and Ford followed with zero-interest financing on certain electric models. "You can practically drive one off the lot for free," joked an analyst from Edmunds, "if you ignore the part where the dealer is bleeding to death." For the first time in years, buyers could walk away from the lot with discounts exceeding $10,000 on a full-size SUV. Faced with shrinking trust and mountains of unsold vehicles, automakers tried to intervene. General Motors launched Operation Reset, offering dealers subsidized loans and cash bonuses for every truck cleared from inventory. Ford rolled out a dealer relief program, allowing franchise owners to delay interest payments for 6 months, but only if they agreed to accept new EV allocations. Toyota and Honda slowed production entirely. reassigning shifts and delaying new model launches. Yet even as they tried to course correct, the damage deepened. Electric vehicles, once seen as the industry's salvation, became a double-edged sword. Automakers had flooded dealers with them, anticipating a government-subsidized boom that never materialized. By mid-2025, EVs accounted for roughly one-third of all vehicles sitting unsold on American lots. Many were expensive models, priced beyond reach for most consumers. Charging infrastructure remained inconsistent and resale values plummeted. Dealers begged manufacturers to stop shipping them more, but corporate contracts left them no choice. Some began storing electric SUVs in rented warehouses to keep them off public display, fearing that rows of unsold EVs would scare off remaining customers. Banks, too, had reached their breaking point. They began demanding immediate repayment on overdue floor plan loans. Insurance companies, facing growing risks, raised premiums on unsold inventory, citing increased exposure due to inactivity. The cost of simply holding a vehicle had become greater than the profit from selling it. By late summer, the phrase inventory burn became industry slang for the slow financial suffocation of dealers, a death by 1,000 trucks. The automakers' public responses were diplomatic, but inside, panic ruled. Conference calls with investors turned tense as quarterly reports revealed staggering losses. GM's second quarter filing showed a 38% drop in U.S. retail volume. Ford reported over $1.4 billion in unsold stock write-downs. Behind the scenes, manufacturers began offering silent buybacks, quietly reclaiming vehicles from dealerships to reduce visible oversupply. Some of these cars ended up in foreign markets, others were dismantled for parts. Amid the chaos, a few executives began to admit what had long been unspoken. The market's obsession with trucks and SUVs had gone too far. An anonymous Ford executive told Automotive News that the company lost sight of moderation. "We built for profit, not for people." That confession echoed through an industry finally forced to confront its own denial. By fall 2025, the crisis reached a breaking point. Dealers started defaulting on their loans en masse. Bankruptcy filings rose 300% year over year. In Ohio, a multi-brand dealership group closed overnight, leaving 30 employees jobless and hundreds of vehicles locked behind chain-link fences. Reports surfaced of dealers selling stock at auction for half its value just to clear debt. Others turned to shadow companies to disguise losses, moving inventory between shell entities to buy time. It was an unraveling, chaotic, desperate, and inevitable. The government, under mounting pressure from lobbyists and unions, considered intervention. Some suggested low-interest bailout loans, similar to those issued during the 2008 financial crisis. Others argued that the market needed to correct itself, that the crisis was punishment for years of greed and miscalculation. Meanwhile, American consumers watched from the sidelines, now holding all the power. Prices continued to drop and buyers waited, knowing that the longer they did, the cheaper the vehicles would become. By the end of the year, it was clear the industry would never look the same. The American auto market, once the global symbol of consumer excess, had been humbled. The dealerships that survived were leaner, cautious, and wary of the old formulas. The phrase, "build it and they will buy," was dead, replaced by a grim new mantra whispered among executives, "build less, sell smarter." What began as a flood of unsold SUVs had become a reckoning. The crisis revealed not just an economic failure, but a cultural one. A nation confronting the limits of its own consumption. Trucks that once stood for freedom and strength now stood for waste and hubris. And as America's vast lots slowly emptied under discount banners and liquidation sales, one truth lingered like exhaust in the air. The age of excess had finally run out of road. By the time the dust settled, the American auto industry stood at a crossroads it could no longer ignore. The old playbook, the one that had fueled decades of growth, excess, and illusion, was no longer working. The collapse of the SUV and truck empire had rewritten every rule the industry once believed was permanent. Executives who built their careers on predicting consumer behavior now admitted privately that they no longer understood it. The future wasn't about horsepower or luxury trims. It was about survival, and adaptation, and humility. Yet the road to reinvention was steep. Consumers, though newly empowered, were cautious. Years of aggressive pricing, unreliable financing, and broken promises had eroded trust. Automakers faced an audience that demanded transparency, value, and authenticity. Marketing shifted accordingly. The glossy commercials showing trucks conquering deserts were replaced with quieter, more grounded storytelling. Families managing budgets, commuters seeking practicality, businesses choosing sustainability. The narrative of dominance gave way to one of redemption. At the same time, financial restructuring became unavoidable. The crisis had exposed how fragile the dealership model truly was. Some companies, following Tesla's direct-to-consumer path, began testing hybrid retail models, smaller appointment-only showrooms with digital purchasing options. Ford piloted micro-dealerships in urban centers where customers could test drive vehicles and complete their transactions online. Analysts predicted that by 2030, up to 40% of traditional dealerships could disappear, replaced by streamlined networks focused on service rather than sales. The shift marked not just a change in logistics, but in culture. The end of the handshake deal and the beginning of the algorithmic sale, there was also a reckoning within corporate leadership. Many executives who had championed the SUV boom resigned or were quietly forced out. Younger, data-driven leaders emerged, speaking the language of sustainability and long-term planning rather than quarterly profits. The obsession with outselling competitors gave way to an obsession with surviving disruption. Companies began to talk less about market dominance and more about resilience. Electric vehicle strategies were revised to match real-world demand instead of political optimism. Some automakers even partnered with public transit agencies, providing hybrid fleets rather than chasing individual ownership at all costs. And beneath all of it lay a broader cultural shift. For the first time in decades, Americans were beginning to question their relationship with cars altogether. The idea that a personal vehicle was a symbol of success had eroded. Urban car-sharing programs expanded, suburban families downsized their garages, and younger generations viewed ownership as optional. The market that once ran on ego now ran on pragmatism. Still, the transformation was not entirely bleak. Out of crisis came a rare clarity. The industry had been stripped of its illusions, forced to rediscover its purpose. The age of endless expansion had given way to an era of intention. The automakers that survived were those that finally understood what their predecessors had forgotten. Cars are not monuments to power, but tools for people. And if the SUV era had represented America's dream of dominance, what came next would be its long overdue lesson in humility.